Trouble Together, Chapter 3. A Visit to the Lab. Life was chaos. Chaos was stress, especially for Lysandre, who liked to control all variables in his life down to the minutiae and who couldn't stand a single pen to be 1 degree off on his desk. Chaos was the enemy, and he lived every day in the trenches, fighting back the forces of entropy that conspired to consume him, his company, and all of Lumio City. It did not help matters whatsoever that Augustine Sycamore was indisputably an agent of chaos. There was a reason why Lysandre tried to avoid collaborating with Augustine on anything work-related, and it had nothing to do with his own so-called micromanaging, and everything to do with Augustine's free-spirited jump-in-with-both-feet approach. Certainly there was some method to his madness, but in all the years they'd known each other, Lysandre had come no closer to cracking that code than Augustine himself had come to finding a keystone that would respond to him. That was to say, not at all. Unfortunately, Lysandre Labs was one of the Kalos League's biggest contractors, and Augustine was the official Kalos League professor. Anytime the League needed technology for their research or to distribute to challengers in general, Lysandre and Augustine were always stuck together like Director Felix wanted the city to burn to the ground. It wasn't that Lysandre held any grudge or ill will towards Augustine as a person. Quite the opposite, as their relationship had never been better and they were going on a date to a new Evolution Stone exhibit at the museum that weekend. But that he was infuriating to work with on a professional level. He was already on edge late that morning as he marched his way into the Sycamore Pokemon Lab, his face set in a scowl as he ignored the receptionist and let himself up to the 3rd floor. "Augustine," he snarled the instant the doors opened before him, "a word." Augustine looked up from where he was busy quite animatedly discussing something with Senna, startled for a moment, then confused as he quickly glanced back and forth as though trying to decide what he could have possibly done this time and if he ought to run. Senna at least immediately excused herself and scooted by Lysandre with an armful of filing folders stuffed with research documents. "Lysandre," Augustine greeted him carefully. "I thought we weren't meeting for work until Friday?" Lysandre was not to be deterred. He crossed his arms defiantly over his chest. Chaos would be tamed, order would triumph, and he would walk out the front doors of Augustine's lab with everything he needed to get his portion of the project done in time for their next milestone. "You told me you would have the data from the last batch of super training tests weeks ago," he accused. "Yes," Augustine agreed. A pause. They stared at each other. He didn't seem to realize the gravity of the situation. He should have had the data to Lysandre by now. Lysandre should have been able to get his staff to edit and refine the code as needed based on all those readings. If they couldn't fix the bugs, the next build would be behind, and if the next build was behind, they would miss the next deadline, and the Kalos League would be pissed. "I'm sorry, my love," his boyfriend finally admitted. "I'm not really sure why you're here." Pointedly, Lysandre held his palm out to him. Augustine frowned. "Ah," he said again after a long moment. "Did I forget to give it to you?" "It's ready," Lysandre prompted him. "It's in my office. Come, I'll fetch it." Lysandre let out a breath and his shoulders began to ease. That was far easier to take care of than he'd expected. Normally it took a lot longer, and Augustine could get quite stubborn and adamant about the technicalities of what he promised. It was nice to just get it over with. Augustine's office was a mess, of course. It was just like his office at the university or his office at home. Whatever system he had to organize his things, it made Lysandre want to claw his own face off. There were haphazard stacks of books and documents, and boxes stacked in the corners and along the walls that he was pretty sure had been waiting to be unpacked since Augustine first moved back from Sinnoh. One in particular he knew had yet to be touched since that day, because he kept a careful eye on it whenever he came in. Just as always, it sat in the eternal limbo of Augustine's "I can take care of that tomorrow" mantra. He even let his pet Helioptile have the run of the place. As Lysandre waited, he watched the little thing cling to the inside of the window, happily basking in the sunlight. Augustine himself seemed unbothered by the chaos around him, and he set to work rummaging through his desk drawers. He mused aloud. No, that's not quite right. I could have sworn I was keeping it there. He pulled a few more drawers and his frown deepened. I promised, Lysander, it was ready and waiting for you, but now it seems to have just wandered off. And there was the catch. Lysander's burning gaze followed each and every small movement of Augustine's, because of course he'd lost it. When wasn't he losing things? He could remember the last time he trusted Augustine with concert tickets quite clearly, and somehow they ended up lost to the Lumio sewer system. That happened years ago, and you'd think Lysander would have learned his lesson then. He took a deep breath. Please do not tell me you've lost 4 months' worth of data, he seethed. Of all the things, do not tell me that. All right. Augustine smiled disarmingly up at him. I won't tell you. Lysander let the deep breath out, burying his face in his hands and just about ready to tear his hair out. He must not lose his temper. He must not lose his temper. Do you have a backup? Augustine's smile did not falter. My love, you seem a little tense, he tried to deflect, and before Lysander could explode, he flew around to guide him towards his leather office chair. I don't want to sit, Lysander snapped. I want to find the damn data. Shh. It's not gone forever. I've just put it somewhere very safe. Sit for a minute, my love. Breathe. This can't be good for your health. Damn my health! He tried to break from Augustine's hand, but his grip was deceptively powerful, and reluctantly, he sat as Augustine pushed him down onto the chair and patted his cheek. You neglect yourself when you get too deep into these projects, Augustine sighed, and Lysander shot him an incredulous look because at least when he got sucked into his work, his home remained spotless. Self-care is important, you know. You need to take a step back and de-stress once in a while. Here. He went to the window and pulled his helioptile off with a quiet shtick, then came to tip the little thing into Lysander's arms. Hold your son. Go to your happy place. Augustine, this is a lizard. The good professor made a dramatic show of rolling his eyes and huffing out a long, suffering sigh, his hands obstinately on his hips. Well, Lysander, it's not like I'm getting pregnant anytime soon. So yes, sometimes your son is a lizard. He took him by the face and smushed a placating kiss to his forehead, then returned to searching the room. You are a very good lizard, father. Now, hush. I need to retrace my steps. The helioptile, Zip, was actually very warm from sitting in the sunlight, and although Lysander didn't want to admit it, it was soothing. He petted the Pokemon's sleek scales, taking deep breaths and focusing on the big blue eyes with nary a thought behind them. Zip stared right back, laying quite still, making soft, approving grumbles before his tongue darted out to lick one eye. Aha! Augustine finally cried, now on the far side of the room. He turned excitedly back to Lysander, who tried not to get his hopes up too much as he gave his boyfriend his attention. I remember now. I gave the USB to Cassius that weekend you were out of town. He ran a few tests for me. I think he still has it. Alright, okay. If Cassius had it, Lysander could work with it. He stood back up and sat Zip onto Augustine's desk. I'll go call him, he sighed, the tension easing from his shoulders. But Augustine, you really ought to get a better system. You'd lose your head if it wasn't screwed to your neck. Augustine shrugged. Well, I don't know. It usually works fine for me. Lysander stared pointedly at the box from Sinnoh. Augustine pursed his lips. Alright, but it's just been so busy here. I can take care of that tomorrow. Anyways, my love, dinner tonight? I'll come back around 8, Lysander agreed. They shared one last quick kiss before he set off, dialing Cassius on his holocaster as he stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the ground floor. Hey, Lysander, long time no see, Cassius greeted as he picked up. How's work? Same as ever, Lysander sighed as the elevator lurched into motion. Now I'll be happy to see the backside of this project. Director Felix is running me ragged. You? Can't complain. Servers are keeping on, and that app I published last week already hit #1 on the holo market. That's good to hear. Listen, Augustine said you had the USB with our project data. Cassius's face fell flat, and he quirked one eyebrow as he adjusted his glasses. "Check his pocket," he said warily. "I gave it back a week ago." The elevator doors opened. Lysander dragged one hand down his face and pressed the button for the 3rd floor again. "Thank you, Cassius," he ground out. "I got your back, man. Call me later, maybe we can find some time to go out for drinks." Lysander stiffly rode the elevator back up in silence. He didn't miss the impish, devious glee sparkling in Augustine's eyes as he marched right back into his office, and Lysander came straight up to him, shoved his hand into his pocket, and yanked the USB out. The asshole made a hobby out of winding people up. "You are infuriating," Lysander hissed at him, and Augustine only laughed. "I can't believe he ratted me out," he crowed, though he obviously very much could believe it. "How I hope to keep you turning in circles all day. You know, sometimes your son is a lizard, and sometimes self-care is watching your beloved lose his mind. And speaking of self-care, I've got something else for you." He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a book that read in bold letters across his front, "Awaken Your Inner Pyroar," written by some hex maniac or another and edited by a hack he assumed they picked up off the street. Lysander snagged it from his hands and whipped it across the room, watching it hit the wall and fall behind the unpacked boxes with a thunk. Augustine laughed again. "One of these days, someone is going to teach you a lesson," he snapped as he began to leave. "Buy me dinner first, then you can do anything you want," Augustine called after him as he resumed his work. He paused before he left the office in full and glanced back. Augustine was busy focusing on printouts from the research Pokemon, and so he quickly and quietly went to grab the fallen book. "I love you," Lysander said, and as Augustine answered, he could still feel that toothy grin in his voice. "I love you too."